Bet you don't know what the constellations are.
You guys are so official. So my first visit here at Pixar, I couldn't believe that this place actually existed in the Bay Area. I couldn't believe anyone got any work done at this place.
The campus itself is really beautiful. There's so many plants and outdoor spaces.
It's like I'm walking around on a resort during vacation. I have some things to do, yes.
It is such an open environment. It's small enough to feel like home, but big enough to find people with a variety of interests.
What I really love about the job, more than anything, I'd have to say, is the culture. I've never been in a place where it is completely safe to be yourself.
Lasell here. Systems. It's Friday. Time to have some fun.
The systems department supports the studio technically. We have a wide variety of different tasks that we do. The common unifying thing between everyone is curiosity, hard work, and definitely a love of ones and zeros.
So one of the great things about doing IT at Pixar, and really hit me the first day I started working here, is how aligned what we do in systems is with the making of the movies. Everything we're doing is in support of getting the movies out the door. I think it's that sort of feeling of being directly connected to the output of what the studio is producing that makes it so exciting to work in systems.
Working here at Pixar, I feel like I felt in grad school. Everybody's learning, everyone's doing. People are so smart and so creative, but they're so collaborative.
There's a lot of problems that we have at Pixar that we're working on where the goal sometimes is to fix them, but a lot of times it's to manage the problem. And so I'm much more interested in people who can think abstractly and learn quickly, as opposed to somebody who's got a bunch of certifications and a particular discipline.
Various problems come up, and the answer isn't clear. And so what you have to do is you have to tinker, and you have to kind of investigate and troubleshoot. And I feel so proud to have just a little bit of contribution to the giant undertaking that is making a film at Pixar.
To see other people enjoy these films as much as I do and how it affects them and makes them think in a new way, possibly, I find that very rewarding.
I am always so stunned at the technical expertise that we have and how that translates into something that's really beautiful.
I'm very proud of the films that we make here. Every time I see one, I can kind of tear up. It's emotional.
So to contribute to something that so many people love and that is so perfectly put together is a little bit daunting, but is also a really rewarding thing.
We all ready for this?
Yeah.
Mac admins are interesting because they're kind of like, they do kind of like what production support does, only what they do is really easy.
Alright, welcome to Macbrained January 2016. Definitely wanted to thank Dana, Jason, Stephanie. Without everybody's contribution here, this wouldn't happen. And absolutely the support from Pixar. And with that, I introduce Faz.
Hi everybody.
know, we're super excited to have you guys out here tonight. And I hope this is just one of many events that will represent sort of Pixar reaching out to some of these really awesome communities like Macbrained. And hopefully you guys are getting a little bit of a glimpse of how awesome it is to do technical work here at Pixar. We hope that that really rings true. Our website is up there, and if there are any open positions that you see on our jobs page, we really encourage you to apply. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but please keep us in mind. I also want to thank, obviously, everyone from Macbrained. We pulled this thing together in about a week. It's kind of amazing, all the work that went into it, and especially Andrew and Dana. These guys have been fielding my myriad emails for the last week, and I really appreciate everything you guys have done to make this happen. I also really feel like I have to call out the hard work of Terry Lee Mosley. The experience you guys had of walking in and having all the food and drinks and everything ready, that's all him, and that was a ton of work. So thanks, Terry. So one of tonight's speakers, our own Chris Lasell, started Pixar way back in 2003, and he was brought in as a contractor to help with the OS 9 to OS 10 migration. I think it took us all 3 days to offer him a full-time job, and I think it took him a little bit longer to decide whether or not he wanted that full-time job. He was riding around the country on his bicycle, so we had to pull him off the bike and stick him in the desk. And a lot of the tools that we use to this day were born out of that OS 9 to OS 10 migration in the early days of OS 10 at Pixar. So Chris is going to talk about one of those tools called D3. And after that, we're going to have some guests up to talk a little bit about Apple's device enrollment program, and hopefully learn a bit about this relatively new program from Apple. A number of bars and restaurants around Emerald, so hopefully you guys find a place to hang out afterwards. But we really appreciate you making the trip. A lot of you had to drive long distances to come here, and we're really, really happy and excited to have you here. So without further ado, Chris Lasell and D3. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and pardon me a second, because I have to quit the streaming software and relaunch it. Are we good?
Go to your slides now.
Let me go to my slides. Just a second. That one. Yes. Yes, no?
No.
They will improvise. I will start talking. Okay. This is a modified version of a talk I gave about a year and a half ago at JNUC at the Jamf Nation User Conference. Hopefully enough people here are familiar with Casper to get something out of this, and if not, hopefully you'll learn something anyway. Long time ago, I did a JNUC session in 2012 about some command line tools that we had written to extend the Casper suite. Primarily, I talked about D3. D3 is our package deployment and patch management system, which includes something called Puppy Time, which is used to entertain users during logout installs. And D3 Admin, which is the tool used to manage the packages that are in D3. The biggest question after that talk was, is it open source? And I had to say no. Pixar had never really open sourced anything at that point. Finally, 2 years later, I said yes, partially. We had open sourced the JSS Ruby module. After that 2012 talk, I really decided, there's enough Casper users out there who might actually benefit from something like this. So let me start the process of open sourcing this, which meant rewriting it from the ground up, because I had written it exclusively for our environment. The first part of that was writing a mod. I wrote it all in Ruby because I'm a Rubyist, and I know that hardly anyone in the Mac community is a Rubyist. but I am, and hopefully I can sway a few people. So I wrote that module, and that module is the foundation of D3. So today I'm going to talk about that Ruby module a little bit, and I'm going to give you an overview of D3. We are hopefully going to be open sourcing D3 within 2 months. So it's very early. You're going to have to do a lot of work to get it working with your JSS, but it should be released within a couple months. Anyway, first let's talk about the module. The Ruby module basically helps you interact with the JSS API. The API gives you all sorts of access to different objects in the Casper suite. And the Ruby module abstracts those objects into Ruby objects. And once they're Ruby objects, you can do all kinds of things with them. Which objects? Well, the JSS API gives you access to, I don't know, about 60 different kinds of objects. And I've only implemented a few of them because we don't need all of them here at Pixar, and because I just don't have that much time. These objects I have implemented in a way that you can create, read, update, and delete them. These three, computers, policies, and mobile devices, I've created so that you can read them, update those attributes of each one of them, and delete them. And these, you can read them and delete them, and if you want to update them, just go use the JSS, because these aren't things you have to change very often. I also added to this Ruby module some non-API classes. First off, there's the connection object. This is an object that represents the connection to the REST server. Configuration object that stores all your configuration settings and uses them by default. A server object that represents the JSS that you're connected to through the API. A client object that represents the machine that's actually running the code that is assumed to be a JSS client machine. And a module called Composer that basically is named after the Jamf application called Composer that lets you build packages. This also lets you build packages, build either DMG or PKG packages, all from the command line. So the API itself lets you see the information about all these objects and change it and write it back to the database. But once you get them all into this unified programming environment, they can work together to give you more than just the information by itself can give you. For example, a package object combined with distribution point object, a network segment object, and client, you use them all together, and then you can use the package object to install itself onto a client through the correct distribution point, depending upon the network segment that you're currently connected to. You know, that information is all there in the JSS, but once you get it all in one place, you can actually use it to do something. And the module allows for that. A script in a client, you can grab the script from the JSS and run it on the client really easily. Extension attributes, the definition of an extension attribute combined with an advanced search that gets created on the fly, combined with computer information, gives you better on-the-fly reporting about the extension attributes you might have defined in Casper, better than you might get through the actual web interface. And we'll take a look at this later, but objects that refer to other objects, you can actually check that they exist before you try to use them, because if you're doing all the raw XML stuff to the API, and you try to say use an object that doesn't actually exist, you'll get a 409 error that doesn't really tell you anything. This will actually tell you, hey, that doesn't exist. And we'll see an example of that in a minute. So how do you work with these objects once you actually start doing this? Well, I'm going to show you some examples. And these are captured from what's called an IRB session. If you've never used Ruby, IRB is interactive Ruby, and it's kind of like a shell that you just type Ruby into, and you get the responses back, kind of like with a bash shell. So we'll take an example of how to actually do this. First, you need to install the actual Ruby module. And because it's a gem, Ruby gems are the standard method of packaging Ruby modules. And all the little green blocks over here are a terminal session. So here's, I'm root and I'm going to install it. If you just type sudo gem install JSS API, you will get the module on your computer. Then you can start using it. It'll automatically install any other gems that it needs, and it needs those three. Once you're there, fire up your IRB session or open up your favorite code editor and start writing code. The first thing you need to do is load in the module, which in Ruby you do with require, and that's the name of it. Once you've installed it with the gem, it should just work once you type that. Then you need to connect to the API. So there's an example of how to connect to the API. It doesn't like when I do the pointer. I'm going to turn the volume down. Okay, we don't need any more sound. So your connection is always stored in that constant. You give it the connect method. You give it a bunch of options for your server and your password and your user and so on and so forth. If you have a self-signed certificate, you need to do that or else you'll get an error because it's a self-signed certificate. Or if you prefer, you can just provide the password because the rest of it can be stored in the config. And read the documentation about how to do that. But if you store stuff in the config file, then it'll just use it. But the config file does not store passwords because that's very insecure. It's just a text file. You are welcome to use any means you want to securely get the password and pass it in. You can either just get it and pass it in like that, or if you want, you can give the word colon prompt and it will then prompt you in a terminal for it, or you can pass it in through standard in. And with those two methods, you're welcome to get it any way you want. But for security reasons, it doesn't store it in the actual configuration file. So once you're connected, you may want to just list certain kinds of objects. Say, hey, tell me about the computers I have, or the mobile devices I have, or the policies I have. And if you've ever used the JSS API, you know that one of the resources you can download is just a list of each object. So here's an example of how to get lists of objects. In this case, we're going to do a mobile device. So the double colons there, those just are namespace separations. So the module is JSS, and within there is a class called the mobile device, and there's a class method called all. Any of the other classes in there you can also call all on, and it will just it'll talk to the API, get you the list, and return the list as an array of hashes. A hash in Ruby is like a dictionary in Python. It's a key value paired list of things. So here you can see mobile devices. I've got a couple of them there. I can get, here's another example. You may want to not just get all of that information, but just a list of their names. So you can say all names, or all IDs, or in some cases, all serial numbers, and you'll get a list of all of those. Sometimes it's handy to map the ID numbers to the names, or the ID numbers to the serial numbers, or something like that, in which case you say map all IDs to something, in this case name, and you'll get back a hash mapping the ID number to the thing. So when you're manipulating all of your stuff, it's very handy to be able to get these lists. But the lists of things aren't actually the objects themselves. So how do you actually get an object? Well, you have to create a Ruby instance of the class and tell it what to go retrieve from the server. So here I've got a variable that I'm going to populate with an instance of JSS computer. So I'm making a new instance of it, and I want it to retrieve the one that's named Kimchi. And you can use either name or ID to go retrieve something. That'll work for any object in the JSS. All of them have names and ID numbers. Some of them have more. Computers also have UUIDs and serial numbers and MAC addresses. All of those will also work. Any unique identifier that the JSS recognizes as a unique identifier will work to retrieve the object. But names and IDs exist for everything. So in this case, I've now got my variable acomp that has a computer object in it. Once I've got it, I can start looking at its attributes with method calls. So using acomp.serialNumber will show me its serial number, and last contact time will show me its last contact time. There's a bunch of other things in there too. One of them is a more complex object called hardware, and this just reflects the way the data comes from the JSS. There's a subset of data called hardware in the XML that comes from the JSS that contains all the hardware data. That is mapped to a hash in Ruby, so you need to know what thing inside of the hardware data do you want, and you can get it. All of this is available in the documentation. There's a lot of stuff in there. But some attributes are very simple, some are a little more complex. So once we've got an object in Ruby, maybe we want to update some of its settings, some of its attributes, and then send them back to the JSS. Here's examples of how to do that. With really simple attributes, you just use an equal sign. I want to change the barcode of my computer, barcode 1, there's a new value, there's a new value. I want to change the PO number and the PO date, bingo, I changed them. Those are really simple. Not everything is quite that simple. Here's an example of a policy. I pull a policy out of Casper using that. Its name is myPol. Bingo, I've got it. Now I want to change its scope. Policy objects contain within them scope objects. Scope objects have a method to add limitations to the scope. I want to add a network segment limitation for a network segment called backups to this policy. That's the syntax to do it, but when I do it, I get an error. No existing network segment with that name. This is what I was talking about before. If I had done this just with the XML, just sort of on the fly, I would have submitted the XML to do this, and it would have given me a 409 error without telling me actually what was wrong. This checks before I submit any XML. In fact, you're not submitting XML, it's submitting XML. But before it submits any changes, it's checking, hey, you're trying to add a network segment. I'm going to go look at all the network segments and tell you if the one you want doesn't exist. Raises the exception before you actually submit anything, saving you a lot of hassle and trying to figure out what's going on. So in my IRB session, I'm like, oh, well, let me just call the all names method on the network segments and see what their names are. There's the one I wanted. I forgot that it's -lan at the end of it. And then I do the whole thing again with the correct name, and it works. After I've made all of my changes to my local Ruby object, I then have to say update or save. The actual method is update, save is just an alias of it. And it will send the changes back up to the JSS. Of course, this assumes you've connected with a username and password that have access to do that. So creating objects. Let's say that I want to create something in the JSS that doesn't exist there yet. Well, it's a similar thing. First thing I have to do is create a Ruby object. But instead of creating one that has a name that's already there, or an ID that's already there, I specify that the ID is new. And then I have to give it a name, because if you're creating a new thing, it's got to have a name. Some objects also require other options there too. For example, if you're creating a new group, you have to specify whether it's a smart group or a static group right when you create it, because they act very differently. In this case, I get my Ruby object, and I can even ask it, are you in the JSS? And it says, no, I'm not. It's not there yet. So now that I've got my Ruby object, I can start adding all of my attribute data as however I want. So I made a package up here. I need to set its category. I need to set its OS limitations. I need to set all the various things you can set about a package in Casper. Once I've set them all into my Ruby object, then I just call the create method on it, which is also aliased as save, and it will create it in the JSS. Deleting objects is even easier. Every object that I've implemented can be deleted. And you do it just by creating your object and calling delete on it. So there I'm creating a new JSS category object based on the one that's called my category, and then I'm deleting it. Thing is, it happens immediately. You don't have to call save or you don't have to call update. It just happens, because it just happens. So be careful, don't just willy-nilly delete everything. And because Ruby is Ruby, you don't even have to store it in a variable first. You can just make the instance and delete it all in one line. So if that's really just the tip of the iceberg. There's each object has lots of different methods. Those are common to all of them: adding, creating, changing different attributes. But there's tons and tons and tons of stuff in there, even for the half of it that I've implemented. If you really want to start using it to write your own code, then you're going to have to look at the documentation. The source code itself is really heavily documented. You probably can't read that. But those are all comments, and they're very specially formatted comments. for this method. And the reason I formatted them that way is so that if you go to that URL, it automatically on the fly generates this documentation from GitHub. So that's the basics of using Ruby to access the JSS API. And if you download it, you'll see there's a couple of sample programs included with it to show you how to use it for practical purposes. One of them, I believe, lets you manipulate computer groups sort of from the command line, add members, remove members, create groups, remove groups, stuff like that. And another one lets you update network segments based upon some tab or comma delimited file. Those are the two sample programs. But the main reason I created the whole thing was for D3. So we're going to talk about D3. What is D3? D3 is a package and patch management tool that sits on top of Casper. It's sort of like Monkey for Casper, except it's all command line. I know Monkey has command line stuff, but also has some GUI stuff. This is still all very command line. It extends the capabilities of Casper's package management, which isn't that great, but hey, it's a start. It mainly is a client program called D3 and an admin tool called D3 Admin. It also utilizes Casper scripts and Casper policies for various kinds of customization, and it stands for Depot 3. Many years ago, probably 25 or more years ago, when Pixar started having an infrastructure of workstations that needed stuff deployed to them, all those workstations were Linux boxes. Or they weren't Linux boxes, they were probably some. They were Unix boxes of some kind back then. And the method they used, they called Depot, and it was basically a bunch of symlinks and CPs to NFS mounts and stuff like that. It got rewritten into something that used RPM packages, and it was still all Unix-based and Linux-based, but it was based on RPM. There was a server full of RPMs, and it would kind of do what D3 does now based on RPMs aimed towards Linux machines. When Pixar moved to OS 10, hey, this is Unix just like Linux. Let's start using all of the tools from the Linux side. We imported D2, which is what it was called. Depot 2 was just shortened to D2. And for many years, we used D2 as our main deployment system, but that meant we had to build RPMs, and it was a very Unixy kind of thing, and the Mac team wasn't very Unixy, and it was challenging. And they didn't handle PKGs and all sorts of things. So we used it, we struggled, we built other tools around it, and then it died, and the guy who originally wrote it left, and nobody wanted to support it. So we're like, hey, it's 2009. There's got to be a commercial product out there. So we start looking around, we look at the Casper server. It can kind of do what we want. We're like, yeah, let's take a look at this. For other reasons, we also wanted to go to a third-party tool of some kind. So we take a look at the Casper server. It kind of does what we want, but not quite. And I realized if I just add this one little thing, I can make it do what we want. So we started using Casper, and I wrote the original version of D3. But it was originally from this thing called Depot. So D3 packages. D3 packages are just Casper packages, except they're a lot smarter. They're Casper packages that know that they're different versions of the same thing. That's the primary difference. That's why Casper can't really, as it is right now, can't really do proper patch management. It doesn't know that this package and that package are different versions of the same thing. They know their status, whether they're pilot, live, skipped, or deprecated. Pilot meaning they're on the server, but they're not ready to be pushed out everywhere yet. Live meaning they're on the server, and this is the live version of the thing. Skipped meaning, well, it was up there, but we skipped over it and went to another one that was live. Deprecated means it used to be live, but now it's not live anymore. These packages know their apple.pkg identifiers, so you can actually use Apple's tools for the local installs. This is assuming that the thing is a PKG installer. DMG installers, of course, don't have those. Auto updates on clients when a new version is made live on the server. That's a very handy thing. Oops, or do that, have that. It can conditionally install or uninstall based upon pre-script status. So PKGs, of course, have pre-install and post-install scripts built into them. In Casper, you can run Casper scripts before installing a package and then again after installing a package. The problem with doing that in a policy in Casper is you can't not install the package based upon the exit status of the script that you run beforehand. D3 uses Casper scripts before and after in the same way that a policy would, but if the script doesn't exit successfully, the package won't install. So that's a very handy thing. And the same with uninstalls. We have pre and post uninstall scripts, and if the pre-uninstall script fails, then the uninstall will not happen. Quick and easy manipulation from a shell. If a user calls me up and says, I need this package, it's not in self-service, I want it installed now, I'm on the phone with them, I type SSH their machine, root at their machine, or whatever, and then sudo d3 install some name, and it's done. It takes me about 10 seconds. I don't have to launch an app, connect to a computer, fill out a bunch of forms, hit a button. I just type this thing and it's done. And it can auto uninstall if an app is unused for a certain number of days. Each package you can set an expiration period on, and there's a little program that D3 includes that you can run on the machine that monitors every time something comes to the foreground and just makes a note of the timestamp of every time every app comes to the foreground. And then every time D3 sync happens, which we'll look at in a minute, it will look, hey, this thing hasn't been brought to the foreground in X number of days. I'm going to uninstall it. And that's a pretty handy thing sometimes. So the D3 client. The D3 client is a terminal command called D3. You type D3 and then some options if you want them, the command you want, and the arguments. You use this to install and uninstall packages. There's how you install the currently live version of FileMaker. To pilot packages, so there's how you install the not yet released version of FileMaker from your server. When you do that, when a machine is piloting something, it stops automatic updates of that, of in this case FileMaker, what's called a base name. So you can pilot it for however long, and it won't. You can do other things with the live package, and the pilot machine is in pilot mode for FileMaker, and it's never going to automatically do anything to FileMaker once it's in pilot mode. You can get, hey, show me what's installed. Only what's installed through D3. If you install something through other methods, then there won't be a D3 receipt. There'll be other receipts, but list what's installed, list what's available on the server. Again, there's scoping based on Casper groups, so not every machine will have access to every package. Show me the files that are in a certain package. There's all different kinds of lists you can get out of it. And most importantly, D3 sync, which I'll talk about next, and puppy time. D3 syncing is how all the automatic stuff happens. When you run the command D3 sync, it does these things. It updates any installed packages if there's a new version made live on the server. It installs any packages that have arrived on the server that are in scope for this machine. It updates the receipts so that if, say, for the package that's currently installed on this machine, on the server I've changed its expiration period from 30 days to 14 days. That will get updated locally, and if it hasn't been run in 14 days, it'll get deleted right away. It enlivens pilot installs. So if version 2.5 of something got installed as a pilot on this machine, and that exact same package becomes live on the server, then the sync process will recognize that and just mark the local install as this is now live. If you skipped over that one and made a later version live, then this one's going to stay in pilot forever until some admin, preferably the one who put it in pilot, goes and takes it out of pilot. And the sync process also expires the packages that are due for expiration. Puppy time. Anytime a package requires a reboot, then when the package is installed, it's not actually installed, it's just added to a queue. The user is notified to log out as soon as possible, and that notification is just the triggering of a Casper policy, so you can do that notification any way you want. Once the logout happens, the packages in the queue are installed, and while it's happening, a slideshow of cute puppies. We discovered that puppies were the thing many, many years ago, and puppy time has existed at Pixar for at least 10 years now. But it's just a folder full of images, and you are welcome to point it at some other folder with any images you want. But it's still called PuppyTalk. And you can optionally run some other policy to do whatever else you want before the reboot happens. D3 admin. D3 admin is the tool that you use to add and edit packages to D3. You can think of it as kind of a command line combination of the Casper admin application and the Composer application. You use it to do all of these things. You can add packages to D3, and it of course also adds them to Casper. The nice thing about that is once you add them in D3, they're just Casper packages, so you can do anything Casper-y that you might otherwise want to do also. Just don't go deleting it from Casper unless you use D3 admin, or else you'll still have this data lying around in D3 pointing to this non-existent Casper packages, and that might cause problems. Oops, sorry. Configure the package settings, make packages live after piloting them. You can give it the -W or -- walkthrough option, and it will present a menu to you of all the things you can do. This is all in a terminal. Of all the things you can do, and let you change them sort of prompted. Or, if you want, you can give a big, long command line with all the options on a single command line. And that'll just either do the editing or the adding. And that is what makes it scriptable. We have a whole team of people here who develop Mac software, and they use Xcode to develop their Mac software. And at the end of their build process in Xcode, they have a big, long D3 admin command line that automatically builds a PKG and adds it to D3, ready to be piloted. And they already have a few policies and scopes to set up to automatically install it on their test machines. So they just say build in Xcode, and boom, it all just happens. Very handy for developers. And the admin also gives you a bunch of client reports. It talks directly to the JSS database and can pull out a bunch of reports about what's installed, which machines have pilots of this base name, which machines, what are all the D3 packages on that machine, as of the last recon into Casper. And also, just because our developers want this, you can archive the packages in their metadata. So an old version of something that was released doesn't just get deleted, it gets kind of moved off to the side, out of Casper, out of the storage space, but you can still retrieve it if you want. They really are paranoid about deleting things. So it has the ability to archive stuff. So that's D3 admin. Sorry I couldn't actually give you a live demo. Even if I could, I wouldn't, because live demos always blow up. I do have a functional version of it on this machine. Maybe, if there's time afterwards, I can show a couple people. But that's it. And here's some of the open source information. The JSS gem is already available right there. D3 itself will, within a couple of months, be there. We had the first meeting with legal on Monday. So it sounds like it's all good to go. We should be able to have it up on GitHub within a month or so. Right now, there is almost no documentation and certainly no help getting it all set up. You've got to do a lot of work to your JSS to get all the things in place for this to work. And eventually I'll have an installer that walks you through all of that. But right now, you just got to know it. And I'm in the middle of writing all of that. These slides, the version that they were in this morning, which is a bit different, are available there. And here's how to get in touch with me about these things. Right now, those two addresses just go to me, but who knows where they will someday. And on the Slack Mac Admins channel, there's the channel for the JSS API, and that's me. Gotta wait for the builds. I went back too far. I meant to go to that slide. Okay. Now that you've seen that one, I'll go back to this one.
All right. Questions?
Pretty good assumption, but I'm assuming D3 is written in Ruby?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
All
okay.
this is in Ruby.
Figured.
Ruby is actually a cool language, even for Python people.
So you mentioned a couple times about D3 having its own data store separate from Casper. Is
that on a server or on a
It's actually in the JSS MySQL database.
Okay,
It
so
makes
it's
another table in there and links to their packages table.
What does Jam think about that?
Well, before we even started using Casper, when we were kind of having our little chit chats with them about this, and I started asking them questions about my use of their thing, I was like, "Can I make my own tables in your database?" And they're like, "Yeah, I guess so." They know that I'm doing this, and they know that I'm open sourcing it. So, and even if they didn't want me to make the table in there, you can just make another database on the same server and still link to it. It would still work fine. But right now, when it does it, it makes the table in the actual Jam software database in MySQL, and whatever backups you have going, as long as it's doing a full dump, you get the backups of the D3 stuff. The built-in JSS backups that are part of Casper capture the same thing because they just do a full dump.
My question is actually for Elliot Jordan. Do you plan on making a GUI for this?
I do not, but I welcome someone else to. Actually, when it comes to making a GUI, the GUI would only really be useful for D3 admin. For D3 itself, for the packages, just use self-service. These are in Casper, so just put them in self-service. You can even just make a policy that runs the D3 command if you want to have all the expiration and all that stuff. And we've started to do that, and we plan to do a lot more of that. We don't, to this point, still use self-service very much, but we're slowly getting the community used to the idea of it. Right now, when someone wants software, they just put in a work request, and one of us gets it, and then we type a D3 command, and they have it. But putting it all in self-service would be pretty easy.
So since you're creating your own tables, it sounds like you're working with on-prem, and folks using Jam Cloud might have a challenge.
We're definitely doing everything on premises here, but we are starting to play with a single cloud distribution point. Cloud distribution points are not available in the API right now, but yeah, for that probably won't work because I'm making direct SQL calls. Probably, as long as I have access to an. There's a few things that, like some of the reporting, I just go to their tables. It's not just about my table. Yeah. I'm interested in other people expanding this. Like I said, we wrote this for us. We don't have that. We have like 1,600 machines, and they're all here. So it's not a very complex Casper setup. And this could be expanded. I tried to write it in a way that using the API as much as possible. But to do this, you really do have to talk to the database. Of course, we all know that Casper or that Jamf has talked about, yeah, they're going to bring us patch management. I am in conversation with them. I need to renew this conversation so that I'm in the loop as they do this so that I can make D3 compatible with whatever they do. As you might have noticed, this tool is not about acquiring the patches. It's about distributing the patches. Auto package and things like that are for acquiring the packages, and I think the tool that Jamf is writing on is probably going to focus on that part first. I don't even worry about that at all. It's up to you to go get them. And in the future, I'd love to see some integration with auto package with this, but we'll see how many people adopt it. So.
In the example that you use, where you created a new package object through D3, how did you get the actual package file, the .pkg, up to your distribution point?
When you use the API to get the information about the distribution point, it comes with all the information you need to actually mount it in a read-write fashion, except the password. It has the password in a hashed fashion. So D3 requires the password. So if you're running D3 admin to add a package, the person running D3 admin, the first time they run it, it walks them through, hey, type in the read-write password for this. Type in the read-write username and password for that. And it stores them all in their keychain. And then when they use D3 admin, it retrieves those from the keychain it retrieves the distribution point read-write password from the keychain, uses it to mount the distribution point, upload the package, and then unmount it. That mounting, unmounting, password checking is all part of the API module, not part of D3. D3 just uses it.
We have a question from the stream from Alistair. Can you upload, export fileable to keys / query escrowed state?
At this point, I don't believe so, because that would be part of D3. That would be part of the API module, and I haven't implemented it because I haven't needed it, but I don't even know, is that stuff available through the API right now? I mean, it's definitely available through SQL, but no, I don't think they are. So the answer, unfortunately, is no. With the API module, if it's not in the API, it's not in the module. So, which is what I was talking about with like cloud distribution points. I have added something, even though cloud distribution points are not in the API. I've made a setting in D3 so that if it can't get to your local file share distribution point and you have defined a cloud distribution point, it will grab the URLs from the cloud distribution point through SQL and try to download the package that way. So that clients that are off campus can still, if we've got a cloud distribution point, can still actually get to these packages.
Yes, hi. You had mentioned when using Enliven, if you have a package that's at a specific version number and your pilot trues up with the live, how do you take into account software that might have the same version number but a different build number for a forked edition?
So in D3, every package is identified by this three-part name called an edition. There's a base name, which is like FileMaker in the example I was using there, that defines all of the different packages for that one piece of software. The base name, followed by a dash, followed by whatever the version of the actual software is, followed by a dash, followed by what we call the revision. A revision is a new packaging of the same version. And edition, which is base name dash version dash revision, are unique to every package in D3. That is that concept of an edition is core to the whole thing about understanding base names and editions together are how it figures out what's older and what's newer. And it looks at the edition to see, hey, this one is the one that became live, this actual package. And then it just marks it as live. So, does that answer your question?
Sort of. I was just wondering if it does an upgrade too, if necessary.
It won't. The concept of piloting is that some admin is intentionally doing the piloting, therefore it is the responsibility of that admin to deal with the clients that are doing that. And it will only mark the exact same package live. If the live one is newer than that, then it's up to the admin to go unpilot it so that the live one can get installed if needed. And D3 admin gives you a bunch of reports to go find those really easily. Mike.
So when you run the D3 command line tool on a given machine, it's not like adding that particular client to a policy that's then just running that policy. It's actually going out, downloading the package, and just running it. Okay. So now what happens if that same client is a part of a policy that would scope the same package to get installed? Won't it get installed the second time?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. There's no way that you can relay to that policy that action's already been taken.
The jam for seat will be there. So if the policy knows that it's already there and doesn't reinstall it, except I don't know if policies can do that. Smart groups, yeah. Do your scoping right. We don't run into that because we don't use a lot of policies to install packages. We use D3 to install packages.
You said you're creating your table in the Jamf database. Are you then using the same username and password that you use for the JSS, or separate username and password that you restrict access just to that one MySQL table?
That's up to you. All it asks for is it depends on what you're doing. If you're running D3 admin, it needs write access to that table specifically and read access to several other tables. If you're just installing stuff, if you're running the client, then it just needs read access to everything. On not exactly everything, but it's easier just, read access to the JSS and it'll be able to see everything. When you create the configuration files, or if you're running the admin, go through the little configuration process to put stuff in your keychain, it'll ask you all these questions. Hey, what's the user that I connect to? What's the password for that user that has, either read-write permissions or read permissions, depending on if you're doing the client or the admin.
The D3 admin, though, doesn't require the username in MySQL to have write access to any of the JSS
No,
databases.
it only needs to write to that one table. It needs write access to the API to write to the other tables. But anything that needs to happen through the API does happen through the API. But there are a lot of things that, in order to achieve these goals, you can't do through the API, so we go directly to the tables. But the only writing we do to the tables is to that one table that we create. Anything else? Cool. Thank you.
All right, cool. Give us a couple seconds, throw some chairs up on the stage, and we'll start our panel. All right.
So let me tell you about stories from the I can.
All right. So we're gonna have a little panel on DEP. We have John Kitzmiller, which some of you have met, I'm sure. We have Manuel Murillo. Woohoo! And Miles Lacey. All right. So real quick, kind of a real brief, basic overview. What is DEP to begin with? Just based off of Apple's site itself, it's something that simplifies the initial setup of a device, right? It's a way to ensure that this device will always be managed, will always be provisioned a specific way. I literally stole this graphic from Jamf because it was a very good layout of how the DEP process works and where things connect first. Obviously, you don't have to be a Casper client to use DEP. Many of the over-the-counter MDM solutions work. And then there's even DEPI, which is a open source Python script to object to enable this as well. All right. So real quick to get the thoughts flowing, then we'll open up to the stream and then to the audience for questions about DEP. But to the panelists here, I wanted to see what were your experiences setting up DEP?
I get to go first. Okay. So I've had quite a bit of experience with DEP. By the way, Apple hates it when you call it DEP. Just throwing that out there. Yeah. So DEP. So I used to work in professional services for Jamf Software and did a lot of jump starts where DEP was set up. And overall, it's actually pretty smooth. It's the hardest part of DEP is the paperwork. It's the legal stuff you have to go through. It takes days to approve it. Once that's done, it's really smooth and great.
Very similar experience, oddly enough, since we both came from Jamf. Excuse me. And yes, the paperwork has been the worst part of it. That has improved drastically. I don't know if any of you got onto the system in the early days, where it took months. Now it should be relatively short and painless. once it's all set up, it's pretty seamless, and we'll chat through kind of how it all fits together if folks have questions in that way.
Yeah, I'll have to agree. The paperwork was the hardest. You get this random phone call asking you to approve it and running around asking legal to approve it. And, that was pretty much just waiting and waiting for it and just being in contact with them.
Cool. So has DEP changed the way that you manage your systems, your workflows? How has implementing DEP changed your day-to-day work?
We'll just start this way and go that way again.
Yeah,
Actually, it really hasn't. We are just starting to roll it out, so we're just trying to figure out all the bugs, what we really want it to do, and what it can do. I think just like next week, we're going to officially say this new hire is going to be started from DEP from scratch. We have a few test computers that we wiped, put back in, did all that. Seems good, but we're actually going to actually give it to a user and have that user be on the DEP program, at least at my company.
So I've experienced DEP deployments from a wide variety of organizations, again, coming from Jan from a consulting standpoint. It can change things dramatically. Where I am right now, I don't think we mentioned it, with Walmart, in charge of Apple products globally for all divisions. We're just starting it, but what we're looking at, what I've experienced in other organizations it is a complete game changer. You go from having IT people touching boxes and opening up computers and imaging them to potentially just putting them still shrink wrapped on a user's desk and walking away.
And that's the way it should be.
Super time saver.
So with the caveat that at my current company we haven't rolled it out yet, we're currently in the testing phase. But kind of echo what Miles said is, the organizations I've worked with and helped deploy, it is a complete game changer. It can remove imaging completely from your workflow. Just the idea of giving a user a machine or shipping a machine to a user who's remote and saying, here's your machine, go. And from the user standpoint, they turn it on, set it up, go through Setup Assistant as they normally would, and then they're just ready to go, and everything happens in the background through automation. It's amazing. Yeah. That's all I got.
Cool. In your experience, have you found DEP to be reliable?
Yes. So I say that with a bit of hesitation because I do a lot of really weird custom things as part of my automated provisioning process, which some of the things aren't compatible with DEP, but I will say that's like 90% my fault and not DEP's fault. But I have noticed DEP does hiccup occasionally, but it hasn't been, it's been mostly consistent for me in my experience.
Well, again, very similar answer, but I would say, like, if you ever watch the Apple status board as to the status of various services, DEP doesn't have problems any more often and usually a lot less often than other Apple services.
Yeah, it's a big headache. I don't think it has its quirks, so you have to figure out like, oh, why didn't this work? Oh, you need to upgrade this. Oh, why didn't this work? Oh, you're on that OS. So there's a lot of things that you find along the way that, hey, it was slower in this OS, it's faster in this one. Hey, in this new version of Casper, it does this. Why did I have to do it in that one? So there's a lot of picking and prodding to it, and then you finally get to this place where you're like, I feel comfortable having a user open the box and just signing on in and going from there.
Yeah, I think that rolls right into the last question that I had for everybody, which was, what were your lessons learned? And it sounds like in your case, the different versions of OSs, but was there anything else that everybody had that was kind of a lessons learned from the initial setup process?
Well, like with anything else, plan, and test. You never know if your environment is within the parameters that Apple tested, or the same as the person sitting next to you in this room or in a conference.
Yeah, I really can't stress testing enough. Testing is so critical. Don't just turn it on and say, okay, it's good. We're gonna deploy it out of like 20 people. You got to test it, make sure it works with all of your workflows. And just to kind of tack on to the end here, if anyone wants to see a really good example of using DEP, check out IBM was using DEP, right? Yeah, so IBM just did a presentation at JNUC in the fall about how they're using DEP. They're doing it right. They're really doing a good job. So I think we already have some questions in the back, it looks like, or unless you have more.
Cool. No, I'm good here. And then if there's any questions on the feed, go ahead and type them out in Slack.
Hi, I did a quick, I guess one of the initial installs of DEP and MDM over at Wikia, and we had some issues where when we would order products through our corporate console from Apple, it wasn't automatically populating the information such that it would flow in. We had to end up, when the product would arrive, go back, re-enter that information in so it would flow down through. Is that improved, I guess, or?
One thing I'd recommend checking is there's a checkbox, and I think you only have the ability to do this when you set up your MDM server in DEP for the first time, for automatically assign new devices to this server. If you don't check that, you'll have to go in and manually add the devices every time. And I think you can only check that on setup if I'm not mistaken. Do you guys know? Do you remember? So what you might want to do is, if you're still having that problem, is actually it's kind of counterintuitive, but delete your MDM server from DEP. You can do it after? Okay, apparently you can do it after, so just change that setting. But there is a setting in there for automatically assign new devices, and then as your your reseller or Apple adds devices to your account, they should automatically flow right into your system.
Awesome, thanks.
Another question?
So for all those devices prior to DEP, you have maybe thousands out there. How have you guys got them in to the system? Are you doing it in one batch? Tell me your experience.
Do a dump out of your inventory and get a CSV.
Okay.
All right, then we can, one of the...
I'd be happy to give more detail on the side.
All right.
It's just getting it with Apple.
All right, then we have a couple questions on the stream. Will OSS DEP implementations like DEPI help accelerate the adoption of DEP among organizations not using commercial tools, and what would be the downsides?
I would say yes. I mean, obviously, if there's open source software that can support DEP, then that's going to accelerate the adoption of DEP in companies that aren't using commercial software. I think the upsides are just the ease of getting machines into your system. I think that's really the whole core of DEP, is making it the least resistant to get machines from not under management to under management. So I think it's just kind of a clear good thing right there.
All right, while Dana runs down here, we'll grab another one from the stream. What happens if someone chooses not to connect to the network during enrollment?
So
they eventually have to.
The short answer is they don't get enrolled in the system because DEP only activates during the setup assistant. I haven't thoroughly tested this yet, but at WWDC last year they mentioned that in El Capitan that you were no longer going to be able to not connect to a network connection. Have you guys tried that? Do you know?
You can still get it. You can still skip it.
You can still skip it.
That's okay. Yeah, I've seen that. So yeah, so DEP will constantly bother you in Notification Center to enroll into the MDM, and I don't think it'll ever give up until you actually do.
It'll still go after you do.
It'll still. Okay, good to know. Yeah. So for those of you who can't hear in the room, it's apparently it will still continue bugging you after you enroll. But so that might still have some bugs to work out. But yeah, I think the takeaway there is if the user chooses not to connect to a network, then the machine's not enrolled.
So I think here we represent a lot of different sized companies, and we hire at different rates. Some of us set up one new computer per week, and some of us set up 100. At what point do you think it is useful to switch to something like DEP?
It's an interesting decision for a smaller shop. I would say it's probably worth it if you're going to be in business for a while, even if you've only got a handful of computers being deployed or devices being deployed. And actually, that was the thing I wanted to add on here was, just in case anybody in the room isn't aware, yeah, you've got that loophole in OS 10, but with iOS, you're not getting out of it. But to go to the current question, I think it's worth the time invested in setting it up to get away from the manual processes that you have to do otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, DEP is free, so signing up for it is painless. At least that part of it of actually just trying to get it. And I think it, for me and my team, I want it to be the new imaging process. You're going to run into these cases where eventually somebody's going to want to buy a computer and they're not going to be at your headquarters. So that's ultimately what I'm planning for. And so that they could just go to the store, pick it up, and then have that experience that headquarters has, and also just have that computer be managed.
In my mind, if you have enough machines that device management is a thing in your organization, then you should be moving towards DEP. So I guess I have two questions. First one, have any of you got depth to work with non-local accounts like Active Directory or LDAP? In my shop and in most environments I've worked in, it's all been local accounts, so I don't really have a good example for that, but maybe I know you're using local accounts too, yeah? Do you? So yeah, we're all using local accounts, it sounds like. So I think I think the answer is don't do that.
The next thing is, like you said, different companies have different sizes.
Yeah.
We have onboarding of like an average of like 250 machines, say, per week. Every minute counts. I haven't found anything that's faster than like monolithic imaging. Even thin imaging, even if you cache all of the installs on disk, the install times on like Office take forever. So like, how does it? I feel like instead of the one IT person doing this, now you're pushing it onto the end user, and what kind of experience is that for them when they're waiting for all these installs to happen?
I look at it from my own usage perspective, and the deployments I've set up, it's sort of software on demand. So if I need to crack open a new computer, if I need to work in Word, I've got Word, I wait a couple of minutes for Word, I'm working in Word while the other stuff loads. So it depends on the culture, right? Do I expect to have all my stuff right this instant, or do I want to have what I need and know the rest of the stuff is coming? Does that make sense?
Well, I also think that you can go down two routes, right? You can go down the route where you're using it as an imaging process, where, you know, your imaging is just going to be enrolling in DEP and actually waiting and setting up, you know, not everything is automated, versus actually, you know, it's my first day, new hire orientation, I'm opening up that laptop for the first time.
Yeah, I think someone was mentioning, like, you don't want to tell them what you're taking away, you want to tell them what they're getting. And they're getting that out-of-the-box experience, that Christmas experience. Try to sell them on that.
Yeah, I noticed that we're talking a lot about Mac in the DEP, but have you guys also enrolled like iOS and iPads, and what's your experience been like with that?
Yes, super simple.
And
That's the only way we deploy corporate-owned devices. So.
Yeah, if you're done, Yeah, I've done, again, for Jamf, I've done jump starts for tons of customers, and I will say my experience, the iOS DEP is just rock solid. I've never seen it fail, whereas on OS 10 I've seen it fail occasionally. So yeah, I think for iOS it's a complete no-brainer.
So we've looked at it a couple of times, and the problems that I've found is that for it to work, it's carrier dependent, and when your company has multiple carriers, and you have that multiplied by different regions, we just can't guarantee a consistent user experience. Like for instance, it'll work on like AT&T, but it won't work on Verizon. So how do you guys have that problem, or is it just kind of like one carrier?
I haven't really run into that.
I can answer that actually. AT&T, if you buy from them, they will not add it to you. If you buy from Verizon, they will.
Yeah.
If you're buying from the
Then you have to
carrier,
add DEP after the fact.
they won't add it to you depending on if the carrier is part of the DEP program. But if you buy from Apple, if it's a Verizon phone or AT&T phone, it will.
So for those of you listening on the stream, what we're hearing from the audience is apparently AT&T does not add devices to DEP if you buy directly from them. However, Verizon does, so it could be a carrier-specific thing whether or not their purchasing stream goes right into Apple. So for example, my company buys everything through CDW, and their purchasing stream does go into Apple. So I would say check with your carriers if that's where you're buying your device starting from the carriers, and make sure that they're set up to put devices into DEP, because that's really probably the most important thing, is to make sure that the source of your devices, whatever that source may be, make sure they're set up to tell Apple about these devices that you purchased, put them in your DEP approval. Because if they don't do that, then it's just not going to work.
Right, I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at. It's like a very big dependency, especially if you have like multiple carriers, multiple regions. It's like a lot of work to do. It'd be great if it just worked, you know.
It would be great if it just worked, but I guess the question I would have for you is there an opportunity to look at your purchasing process, maybe consolidate to one vendor that can supply you with DEP capable devices?
The second part of the question is, how does DEP work with two-factor authentication for mobile, or does it not work for you guys?
Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what do you?
So currently, to enroll a device in our MDM, you have to put your AD auth in addition to a two-factor PIN. When you have DEP, do you lose that two-factor PIN? Because from what I understand, you have to lose that in order for this to work.
That's a great question. You guys, I haven't done anything with that myself. I mean, I'm in my environment, we're using Casper, which doesn't offer two-factor auth to begin with. So, what MDM are you using, just out of curiosity?
So right now, we're actually using Mobile Iron for our mobile devices.
Okay. And Mobile Iron has a two-factor auth option for enrollment.
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I honestly don't. Does anyone out there know? Does anyone know if DP can do two-factor auth in the enrollment process? Right, the device self-authentication through to Apple, but there is an option to require authentication as part of the DEP enrollment. I know at least in Casper, when you do that, you get the automatic assignment of the device to that user, which is pretty helpful, which is, I'm guessing, what you're doing in Mobile Iron, yes? So, yeah, I'm going to just guess that DEP doesn't offer the two-factor, but I would say try it and see what happens.
Thanks.
If we've got one towards the back there. Oh, you guys.
Well, I would further recommend, I would raise that question with your MDM vendor and Apple, and kind of force them to give you an answer.
Just to follow up on the AT&T and the depth, the AT&T did not used to, if you bought it directly from AT&T, you couldn't enroll it, but as of maybe a couple of months ago, you can. We do it now.
Yeah, and I think this is just echoing what we said earlier, is if the vendor is not doing things right, tell them, and tell them you're going to buy elsewhere if they don't fix it.
Yeah, you will have a like an account number with Apple with DEP that you'll have to give to the vendor to make sure they're, like, it's not an automatic process. You have to tell the vendor what your DEP account number is so they can provision the devices to DEP. So make sure you're working with your rep and doing that.
All right, so my question is, how large are your companies that you're enrolling in DEP at, and how geographically dispersed are there? Do you have like folks in Mongolia that you're enrolling, China, India, Western Europe, etc.? How well does DEP work in the far-flung regions of the world?
So that's an interesting, very interesting question. DEP itself is not necessarily location specific. However, where you purchase the devices does matter. DEP is not available in all countries as far as the purchasing goes. So you want to make sure that you're purchasing devices in a country that offers DEP. That said, the company I work for now is about 250 users-ish, and we're fairly distributed. We have some offices in Asia, some offices in Europe. And like I said, we're just getting into the DEP workflow. We anticipate it to work pretty well because I think we're buying all of our devices in the US now. Is that correct, John? Yeah, so everything's coming to the US first, so that's going to work fine for us. I have worked with companies that are much larger and much more distributed through parts of Asia and through countries where DEP is not available. And really the workaround if you want to get DEP to work is to purchase your devices in a country where DEP is available and then ship them to the appropriate country. Miles, you probably have some insight on this.
Yeah, our deployment is tens of thousands of devices across 6 continents. I was starting to list countries, I figured continents would be easier.
You haven't hit Antarctica yet?
No.
What are you guys waiting for?
But, yeah, there are some areas where it's not available. And you could, as John was talking about, pick up your devices in a country where it is available. So that way you're sort of building on that, though it's technically not okay.
Pretend I didn't say that.
But I see a lot of organizations do that. I see a lot of organizations where Apple doesn't do business, just send somebody on a plane to go, buy a bunch of stuff from the nearest Apple store. So we do what we have to do as IT people to get things done sometimes. But wherever DEP is available, it works just as well as anywhere else. It's just a matter of managing that purchasing stream and making sure that the vendor that you're buying from has got all their ducks in a row as far as Apple's concerned, that those serial numbers show up in your DEP account.
I guess just to add, this is still a new program. I mean, it's getting older at this point, but I don't see it not being fully there, like maybe 10 years from now. So if you get your base laid right now, eventually those answers might be, or those questions might be answered. But that's sort of a hope too. So for the stream, he said the local Apple stores will reach out to the other Apple stores in different countries and help you out, which I have found, like talking to your Apple rep, they'll send you the name of somebody in the other country that you're trying to do business in. So it's pretty good.
So those of you who've gone from a more typical imaging deployment method to DEP, I'm wondering if you can talk about the user experience. The users that are less technical, what do they like that Christmas experience? Have they complained? What stories do you have to tell about that?
I actually haven't been there yet. Like I said, we're just testing it, and I don't even think we're going to be there for a while. We're still going to image it via DEP and then give the laptop to the user. And after that, once we get to a certain size, or once we convince our bosses, we're definitely going to try to do the out-of-the-box experience and have them wrap it, have them do the whole thing at their desk. But at that point, again, that's sort of like in the future for my team.
So what I'll say to this is that software is not a magic wand, right? You still need to build a process, you still need to build a user experience, you still need to set user expectations, right? So we had a question earlier about, well, imaging is faster and then I'm gonna get all my stuff instantly. And if that's the expectation, then people are gonna hate it, right? So you need to set those expectations, you need to build the user experience appropriately, and if you've done that, then you're gonna have great success. So with the deployments I'm doing, I'm having conversations with users, I'm building videos, I'm building documentation that goes up on our internal knowledge base, so they know what to expect and they know how to speed things up if they need to, or if I need this app now, they know to pop into self-service and go call for it. So it's all about building that user experience, right? And that's where your success is going to come in.
So no matter what process you use, no matter how you deploy machines, you're always going to have users that don't love the experience. You're always going to have users that complain. But what I've found, and this is with the caveat that majority of the companies I've worked with are newer, younger companies with technically minded people. However, there's always still those people that aren't as tech savvy, is that most people seem to really enjoy the experience of opening up a Mac and going through setup for the first time. I mean, Apple very specifically makes that a very fun, nice, fresh experience because they want people to be excited about the Mac. And I think that really kind of shows through with most people when they get their computer for the first time and they turn it on and go through Setup Assistant. Some people can be very particular about what they want their username to be. So I don't like being in the business of saying like your username has to be first initial, last name. Someone wants to make their username something weird on the Mac, I say go for it. So I think a lot of people kind of really enjoy that level of personalization. And I think it also does something very important where it puts you in the user's mind, it puts IT in the position of we're providing things to you, like through self-service. So if they, set their computer up through Setup Assistant, and then first thing you see is self-service, and here's all the software you're allowed to have. To them, it looks more like you're a provider than a enforcer. So when you hand them, here's your imaged machine with all the stuff on it we say you can have, it kind of gives this impression of like, we're telling you what to do, we're telling you how to be, and a lot of users, especially Mac users, like kind of shy away from that and don't like that. So I think overall the DEP experience is pretty positive, and most of the users I've talked to that have gone through it have been really happy with it. I think we've got one up here, if you don't have anything back there.
I just have a comment. Here I am with my comments, right? Apple's already taught us to go to the store, right? We do it on our Macs, we do it on our iOS devices. So if we just provide them with the store, they'll come. I think the day of pushing monolithic images are kind of gone. I think I want to have the vendor give me the latest and greatest. And because I enroll maybe based on my name and my OR code, I all of a sudden have in my store all the things that should be available to me. And I'm going to decide, think about how many times you redo your phone. Do you really download all those apps you used to download? No. You go back and you pick and choose. So I think it's providing what Apple's already given us, the storefront. And actually, I want the puppy time thing. So if I can click on the puppy time and it takes me to the store, and there's, I can pick and choose from there. I think that's Apple's been the hard part for us. It's kind of easy now, I think.
As far as I know, you're preaching to the choir with this panel.
Yeah, speaking again from a very Casper-heavy background, obviously, self-service with Casper looks almost exactly like the App Store, and that is not an accident. You're right on with that, I think.
Super simple.
All right, we had another question up here.
I want puppy time.
A lot of this talk is about DEP from an out-of-box experience, but what about the recycled users? What about the people who return their machine back, and then you've got a used machine? Are you going to have to then image it back to a factory image, and then it gets re-rolled through DEP, or how does that work? And then the other question was in regards to people buying their machines out of channel. Is there no way to then say, okay, I have this serial number, can I give this to Apple or someone to then get that re-enrolled?
That's harder. That's the hard part.
I'll jump in on the recycling bit. There's a wonderful function called the recovery system in OS X. Hold down Command R when you boot up. If you've got caching servers, it's almost as fast as a local install. Not quite, but it's a lot better than an internet install. So put the factory OS back on there and re-enroll it is my advice.
That's definitely one way to go. I can tell you what we're doing is we're basically, every time the OS revs to 11.1, or 10.11.1, 10.11.2, we are building an auto DMG image and then turning that into a net restore image, hosting it open a netboot server. So if we're turning over a machine, we just basically image it with a completely factory OS. And then, it'll go through DEP again if it has to. If we're getting rid of the machine, then we can take out a DEP. Yeah, go for it.
So I might also suggest a very similar thing, net install, because with your net restores, you're going to end up falling into those occasional traps of hardware-specific builds.
Yeah, net install is also a great option for that. And sorry, there was a second part of the question. What was it?
Out-of-channel purchasing and somehow rolling things.
Yep, that's the hard.
So I've looked into this very heavily because I've been in this situation, and everything Apple's telling me is there's just no way to do that. If your user goes to the store with their personal credit card and buys a machine, that's it. You cannot pull it in. And I think that's a good thing, because otherwise you could essentially say, hey, I have this serial number, this is my computer, and Apple would put it in your management system, you can take over someone's computer that way. So I think it's a good thing that you can't do that. I think Apple's pretty doing that very on purpose, making that difficult. But so my advice, DEP is not the one magic bullet, the one way to enroll all the machines. Always have another option. And I don't know if you're a Casper shop or if you use something else, but I know with Casper, we just keep the the user-initiated enrollment open, and if DEP is not an option for a particular machine, then just having the user go to the enrollment page is how we manage that.
I have a question, just to follow up on the process piece that you mentioned earlier, and I know you guys talked about testing. So obviously for us, we are very globally distributed, and I see a lot of value, particularly in locations where we don't have any IT staff in that country or region. But I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, maybe because you have Walmart's probably quite big, phased deployment, or did you target like certain locations to try it, or you have a mixed environment of kind of doing the old imaging process and enrolling in DEP, so maybe kind of talking about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So I think the gentleman is in the room here who I stole this methodology from, but having basically alpha and beta groups, and going with your alpha first, then your beta, and then everyone else. And for something like this, you might want to have additional groups thrown in there. But the alpha is always my team, right? I may add a few others in, but once I know that the people who are supposed to know how all this stuff works can do it, then we can start moving it outside. And yeah, it's just a matter of identifying those groups within your own organization. It's going to vary widely based on your own needs and your own people. But absolutely, we've done staggered in my org, and I did it staggered in the U.S. We're not at full 100% distribution in the U.S. yet, and we've already begun our alpha in the U.K.
All right, we have one question here, and we'll take the last question from Alistair. Elliot. I still love you. You did this the last meetup. I don't know why. At any rate, we'll take those two questions, and then we'll close up.
A good question on kind of winding down. How do you retire the devices? Once you're done completely and you want to send them off, what do you do there?
So you can disown the device from DEP. What you want to do with the data on the disk is really up to your org. Depending on how you're deploying software, it might not matter, right? If most or all of your stuff is coming out of the App Store, I don't care, right? Go ahead, walk off with it.
I will say that when you disown a device in DEP, make sure you really want to do that, because you can never put it back in DEP again, no matter how much you call Apple and ask. They won't do it. So don't just say, oh, I'm going to test this on this machine. Make sure you really want to do it, because it's not going back in.
So if you were to take a Mac in and get like a main logic board repair or something like that, usually they flash it with the right serial number when they give it back to you. Sometimes, maybe they're better on this now, but they didn't always used to do that. Does that mess up DEP? Do you have to re-enroll it some way?
I haven't checked the document in a couple of months, but the last time I took a look at it, and I'd urge you to take a look at Apple's KB, because they do have a document on this. Their statement as of a few months ago when I looked at it was, an iOS device within hours will be replaced for the old one in your DEP account. An OS 10 computer will need to be re-enrolled manually, right? Meaning as of the state of the program a few months back, getting a funny look here, so please jump in if you have newer information.
That surprises me.
Okay. But I would, if you want to follow up with me afterwards, we can take a look for that KB. But the wording was that within hours, they're going to replace the iOS device, but the Mac will have to be re-enrolled through alternate means.
All right. And for those of you here, remember us, the Powerball numbers were pulled. So, remember the little people.
Just one quick thing, if anyone does have more DEP questions, I did see a couple hands. I think we're all in Slack. You're in Slack, yeah? So we're all in the Mac Admin Slack. If you're not in the Mac Admin Slack team, go to macadmins.org. You can sign up for free. And I believe we're all also on Twitter, yes? Yeah, so find us on Twitter, find us in Slack, or just come find us in person. We'll be happy to also answer questions. I didn't want to speak for you guys, but I'm assuming. Definitely ask Miles, he loves questions all the time. Like, go to his house, it's great.
All right, thank you, panelists. Appreciate it very much. Everybody in attendance, all your awesome questions, and then the people on the stream as well. As always, a special thank you to Pixar for making this happen.
We're gonna double the